Good afternoon. I'm going to talk to you this afternoon a little bit about ethics and leadership. And where I'm going to start at in the beginning here is I'm going to go all the way back in Scripture to the Old Testament, Joshua 24:15. And Joshua was known throughout time as a great leader. And one of the things that he did is he brought all the other leaders within the kingdom together, and he told them that they would have to face judgment for failing to serve the Lord and failing to follow the Scripture. Now, he also told them at the end of this presentation that me and my house are going to follow the Lord. What he meant by that was that you can follow his lead as a leader. And he was known as a great leader to do and follow Scripture. And if they did this and followed in his footsteps, that they too could be known as great leaders throughout time. Now, one of the key lessons that he wanted these people to learn is that we all have choices. And every generation throughout time has had choices. If you look back, there's been many people out there, many leaders that followed false idols or bad leaders that went before them. And that their leadership was short-lived and their success in leadership was short-lived. Now, we can go back to the Garden of Eden and Adam and Eve. They had choices. And their choices, they had to suffer the consequences for their choices. And Scripture tells us that God says that I am going to test you. And it's how we respond to those tests is what makes us or breaks us as a human being and as a person. Now, when you're tested, are you going to make the right choices? That's the question I have for you today. I think back in time when I was a young man, I actually was a teenager, and I was sitting in church, and Pastor Skip was talking to us as a teenage leadership exercise about we're all going to have opportunities to lead in our life. And he said that we're going to have to be an example to others in our leadership style and how we lead. And it was important for us to lead ethically. And he emphasized to us that if we always lead ethically, that we will not have any problems whatsoever in leadership, and that we will be successful in our leadership if we do that. As I grew older, I went to the police academy and became a police officer, and I entered into a supervisory role and leadership role within the organization. And I think back to that teaching that we had when I was a teenager about leading ethically. And that I had been given these God-given talents to lead other people. And that if I followed the instruction of the Scripture and followed what Pastor Skip was telling us, that to lead ethically, that I would be more successful in my career. I have that ability to serve people and impact their lives, just as everybody out here has the ability to serve others and impact their lives. And those choices that we make are important, and ethics are an important part of those choices that we make. Now, leadership is all around us. That's one of the things that I want to tell you. One of the things that I see in our culture today is there's a lack of leadership in the family structure. There's a lot of families out there that aren't being led properly. And Dr. Miles Monroe made a statement in one of his books that said the key to human preservation is in growth and change is leadership. Those are the keys to it. Also, Tom Whiteson, he's a well-known author in our society. He said that Scripture helps us be effective and ethical leaders. You know, ethical leadership is suffering today. And it's suffering because our leaders are failing to follow Scripture. They're failing to lead ethically. They're failing to make the proper choices. They're thinking more about themselves than they are the people that they serve. And that's a valuable thing that we can learn from all of this that we're talking about today. Now, Stephen Covey, he's a guy who studied leaders for hundreds and hundreds of years. And looking back on that, he said there's two different types of ethics that we see in leaders. One of them is personality ethics. And he says that's their appearances, the way we see them to be, but not how they actually are. And then he said that there's character ethics. And character ethics are the ones that are embedded in roots and principles and in the ethics where they were brought up and learned and they practice this and they live this every day. Now, I'm going to ask you the question, why do you think all this stuff's important? Well, nothing happens in this world without leadership. Leadership is vital to us. If leaders go out there and follow those false idols and not do things properly or ethically, they're not going to be their success is not going to be long-lived. They're going to have a short, successful career as a leader. But if they follow Scripture and they follow those deep-rooted, important parts about character and be a good servant, their success is going to be long-lived. You know, there's a need for a rebirth and a renewal of ethical leadership in this country and in the world. Our society is kind of absorbing the attitude and the actions of our leaders, and we need to change that, because the actions and attitudes of our leaders that aren't doing properly are causing these issues in our country today. And so we need to change that. No one is too smart to avoid the consequences, just as Joshua was telling us. We have a choice. You know, poor leadership, it harms our communities, our nations, and our liberties. So that's why it's important to be a strong leader, not only in government, but in our lives and in our families. Now, I hope that you recall this presentation when you have a choice to make, and thank you for your time today.